but also it's not going to be as formal as some of my other stuff. So I wanted to talk about the whole like Israel Palestine thing. What's happening and where it's going. I think the thing, and because I've been, there's been a lot of interesting discussion. I was just watching Alexander Mercouris when I had a long conversation with John Mersheimer that I was watching. Also, History Legends had on, I forget his name, but they were kind of talking about like this conflict. And I honestly just kind of have to wonder like what Bebe's end game is for all of this. Like, is it to ethnically like is it the final solution to the Palestinian question to just finally expel them all to Egypt, to annex at least part of the West Bank to permanently resolve this problem? Because I honestly don't see any other solution to this crisis at this point in time, other than um, just ethnically cleansing the Palestinians one way or another. To get like workable borders in the West Bank, you would have to either remove a bunch of Israelis or remove a bunch of Palestinians or both. There's no way for either side to get like borders that would be acceptable to any sane person. So that's kind of the question. The other thing, though, that I think it's something that people haven't really thought about is why did Bebe even invade the Gaza Strip in response to Hamas? So I guess you can say like immediately, well, he had to invade the Gaza Strip because you have to do something. Hamas attacks you, you get some bad stuff happens. You have to hit back at them. You can't show weakness. But how does invading the Gaza Strip really deal with Hamas? Hamas is like a decentralized militant organization, right? So like they're gonna kill some Hamas soldiers, but I'm sure like the leadership of Hamas is probably in Qatar or somewhere else that it's decentralized into a cell system. So I think they can kill a bunch of uh, Hamas soldiers. They can maybe kill some Hamas leaders, but it's very difficult to destroy decentralized militant groups. So I don't really get how invading Gaza necessarily resolves that. It seems like it's mostly just a knee jerk reaction to try to make it look like they were doing something in the face of this devastating attack. And I mean, now that they've gone in, even if they, let's say it's even possible for them to destroy Hamas, they're going to have to occupy Gaza for like a long period. They're going to have to basically, if you've been watching it all, they're basically leveling Gaza because the Israeli army is largely armor based, and they've just kind of been artillery, just using artillery and missiles to just level neighborhoods so they can move through them with like bulldozers and tanks and stuff. But I don't really see how this actually destroys Hamas in any significant way. Um, how this even really hurts Hamas, to be honest. Okay, I'm going to make the most controversial statement of the probably now, and that's that Hamas won. Hamas, I think, achieved their political objectives beyond their wildest dreams. I think even if a lot of their soldiers and a lot of their leadership is going to get killed during this, they achieved all their political objectives. It kind of reminds me a bit of the Tet Offensive. So the Tet Offensive was a big offensive that the North Vietnamese launched against the government of South Vietnam and the American forces, and it was, from a military standpoint, a failure. To my understanding, the vast majority of the Viet Cong got wiped out during it, and the Viet Cong were more or less finished as an effective fighting force, and most of the rest of the war would be fought with regulars from North Vietnam. However, despite the fact that it was a military failure, it was a massive political victory because it destroyed what remaining support there was in the United States for the Vietnamese War. So even if it was a military disaster, it was a strategic victory. And I think if we look at like what was Hamas trying to achieve with this, obviously they weren't going to destroy Israel. That was never going to happen. If the goal, and like once again, are we going to assume that Hamas is like completely insane? Are they insane, or are they people like led by rational actors who actually have a plan? I think they probably have a plan, because I don't think you can plan like coordinated attacks like that and just what they're doing at the moment without having some sort of a strategy, if you. So I do think the goal was to destroy um, the Saudi Israeli peace talks. I think the goal was to basically turn back the clock and destroy all the progress that had been made on Israeli Arab relations since basically like the Carter era. It was to do that. It was to prevent, I guess, kind of the status quo. Oh, Distributors thinks that Hamas is insane. I mean, they are like radicals, and they are like, as I've said, Hamas is a death cult, but the two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can be a terrorist organization, a death cult, and also not be like run by complete retards. Like these two things are not mutually exclusive. If anything, terrorism is largely a product of the middle class. People who tend to be terrorists are people who are ideologically motivated, often underemployed, and come from some degree of privilege. Because people who are extremely poor don't have access to really ideological materials, and they're too busy kind of scraping by. The type of people who really try to start a revolutionary or terrorist movement tend to come from the middle classes, or people who are educated and organized but don't have power within a society. So I mean, like, Hamas isn't dumb. Hezbollah isn't dumb. Um, these people aren't. These people aren't stupid. So I think like if the objective was to destroy Israeli Palestinian, Israeli Arab relations, I think they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Like, Israel is an international pariah now. This whole thing, like, I mean, let's look at it. You have scenarios where you have basically the entire UN voting for ceasefires, and Israel and America like being, and then a couple just random countries that the U.S. bribed voting against the ceasefire. You have the entire Islamic world. Let's just think about this for a minute. They had the big conference in I think, I forget if it was Saudi Arabia or Qatar over the weekend, but you had Iran, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Jordan, I think. You had all these countries who a couple of years ago were all trying to wipe each other out. Like, the fact that I don't think people really get it. The fact that we're talking about Iran as a sponsor of Hamas, I think just shows how much things have changed. Because remember, like, when we had like the civil war in Iraq, the civil war in Syria, the civil war in Yemen, all of these were like proxy conflicts between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And now we have Iran and Saudi Arabia having regular diplomatic meetings. They're on the same page. They're agreeing to common foreign policies. They've set aside their differences, at least to a certain extent. Like, were they even talking to each other prior to like a year or two ago? It's like stuff has really changed, and it, Saudi Arabia has gone from like being a de facto Israeli ally to like a bitter Israeli enemy. Israel's become a complete pariah on the international stage. It's I mean, you had like this thing a couple days ago where Bebe was just yelling like, even if the whole world is against Israel, we're going to continue our operation. And it's like, dude, that's just like that's crazy. Like what is there? There is no like. Is there a plan? I don't know. It's just there's no indication to me that there's any kind of exit strategy. Like to me, the single most important aspect of any war is to have an exit strategy. Is to say what does victory look like what is our basic definition of victory, what is our stretch goal, what is the minimum that we're willing to accept. You have to go into a situation with at least a minimum. Like you can have different levels of it. Like you could have just hurting Hamas versus destroying Hamas versus like whatever. But you have to have some sort of war goal. And as far as I can determine, Israel doesn't have any war goal. Because you can't destroy Hamas because it's a decentralized militant group. Whose leadership is probably hiding out in Qatar and chilling with the Qatari royalty. So, like, I realistically, I just, like, what are they hoping to achieve? Other than ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. That's basically the only way this entire thing can make sense. But like baby like played completely into their head. Like once again, Israel was actually making progress. They had signed the treaty with Morocco. Um, they had made the treaty with Morocco. They had made the treaty with Egypt. Relations were being regularized. Things were going in a pretty decent direction. Um, as far as the Middle East goes. And then Hamas does this attack and it kills a bunch of people. But he just goes completely ape shit and starts carpet bombing like the Gaza Strip. And basically no one in the world other than the US can really get behind this and say this is a good idea or this is like a proportionate response. And now like Hamas doesn't like it's not even so much Hamas looks like the good guy. It's just Israel looks really bad. Bebe looks like this unhinged lunatic, um, like some sort of cartoon villain. So I think you could argue that Hamas achieved their political objectives, even if they get wiped out from this. I don't know. Maybe that's a controversial statement. I really don't see how it would be. But yeah, so that's how kind of that thing's been going, and I just don't know how long this thing is gonna go on. Now, the Muslim states have been pressing, have started lobbying the International Criminal Court to indict Netanyahu, which I think is fucking amazing. I think that would be like the greatest thing ever if they were to indict Netanyahu. Because remember when they indicted Putin over bullshit? Like they indicted Netanyahu because they indicted Putin because a bunch of Ukrainian children were moved out of an active war zone to a safer place or in like in the interior of Russia. Like it was kind of bullshit. But now we have literally Netanyahu like carpet bombing the West Bank. Sorry, the Gaza Strip. You have that one like Israeli minister who's talking about nuking Gaza. And you just have all this insane shit that's been going on, and people are going like, "Why aren't you indicting these people?" Like when Bebe makes his unhinged speeches, like quoting the Old Testament. Why is he not getting indicted for this? Why aren't they getting indicted for bombing hospitals? And the ICC is like, fuck, we're screwed. What are we gonna do in this scenario? Because we can't indict Bebe. And also, these Western leaders had just sucked off the International Criminal Court. Like, do you remember how they said it was amazing? Like Biden said it was like it legitimized it, even though America didn't accept it. How like this was a big step forward for international rule of law. That they were holding Putin accountable, and that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, stuff happened, and now they're just kind of fucked. So if that stuff happens, then I don't really know. Like, what are they gonna do at that point? These are all very good questions to which there is no answers. Um, so they're either going to have to indict Netanyahu and some of the Israeli leadership. There's also the whole. Now, is this actually going to happen? I don't know. But the point is that a lot of the global south is going to push for it to happen. The Muslim world is going to push for it to happen. They're going to say, like, he should be indicted. So the ICC is now in an impossible situation because they can't indict Netanyahu. So if they indict Netanyahu, then a bunch of like Western countries who have just basically sucked off Israel and said we support everything Israel does, opposition to Israel's anti-Semitism, are going to have to go out and say, well, we said that everyone had an obligation um, to arrest Putin and all that stuff, but we didn't actually meet it. That was just irony, bro. So it's just they're in a really bad situation, and the optics are just completely fucked. So that's kind of where they are at the moment. So I just don't know if there is like an actual solution for this whole thing, or if it's just a an ongoing mess that's going to indefinitely continue. So there's that aspect to it. I was watching History Legends had a guy on. I can't recall his name, but he pointed out that if Israel actually wanted to destroy Hamas, what they would have done is told the Mossad, "The gloves are off. Do what you need to do." Um, is to just be like, look, if you want to assassinate people in Qatar, if you want to go after people in like neutral countries, if you want to like plant bombs and just do all kinds of assassinations, just go nuts. You guys have a free hand to do whatever the hell you want. They would have said that, but that's not what they did. They decided on a military campaign. I mean, I just kind of feel like if Israel was smart, what they would have done is played the victim and cried about how like it's another Shoah, it's another Holocaust, and maybe use this as a way to try to get international sympathy to get a better deal out of a better Arab peace deal, but then telling Mossad and their other like guys go and just deal with Hamas. Just behind the scenes, revenge is a dish best served cold. Just go in and attack, and just resolve this issue. Part of the problem, though, is that I think people forget about this. Most of Bebe's coalition is like the extreme right in Israel. They're like either secular ultranationalists or like religious ultranationalists. Bebe is actually like the centrist or even left wing of the coalition he's part of. But like the guys who are part of his coalition probably want him to go way further. So he has to like appease them. And there's also the issue where like if he gets removed from office, he's probably going to spend the rest of his life in jail. So at this point in time, like, what does he have to lose? You might as well cast the die. You might as well just go ape shit, go balls to the wall, dictator North Korea mode, because like, what other options do you have at this point in time? Um, I just don't know, but that's kind of where we're at the moment, where Netanyahu is just kind of trapped in a prison of his own making. Constantine Martelli says nobody likes him on the world stage either. Putin and Trump spent years courting him, and he burnt all the goodwill he had with him. Well, he burnt whatever goodwill. Like Israel was, I don't know if you guys remember, but like back in the '90s and 2000s, Israel was like global enemy number one, and the Western media was doing such a good job, like demonizing Russia and demonizing China and stuff like that. And I feel like the left in most Western countries had basically forgotten Israel existed, or they'd become pro-Israel, or just like the Palestinians weren't the current thing anymore. I remember when I was in university, like it was commonplace for that uh commonplace for like people in my classes to talk about how they wanted Israel to be exterminated. Like I would almost say it was like left wing anti Semitism was kind of what you got. How radical a lot of it was. Um, well, I'm not saying the ICC is going to indict him. I'm just saying if they don't indict him, then basically everybody's just going to tell him to fuck. It's going to tell them to fuck off, and all the third world countries will start withdrawing from it, and just no one will take it seriously anymore. If they do indict him, then they're going to be an anti-Semitic. It's just like another Shoah organization, um, who's going to be defunded by the Western states that give us like they're just screwed. And this was all because they decided to insert themselves in and uh, endorse Putin, um, and indict Putin to win some temporary political points. And at the time, they were like, "Oh, we blew Putin out." Once again, also, let me see: is Israel a signatory to the statute? Let me see here, because Russia's not even a signatory to the Rome Statute. So, like, Russia doesn't even acknowledge that the International Criminal Court has any kind of sway. Uh, no, Israel is not a party to the Rome Statute. I think. Yeah. Let's see, what does it say? I think Israel signed it and then withdrew its signatory. So once again, like Russia, China, India, the United States, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Vietnam, Thailand, basically most of the world's largest countries are not signatories to the Rome Statute. Um, Ukraine isn't either. I mean, they signed it, but it's not been ratified. So Ukraine's not even like a formal part of it. So basically, everywhere they lose one way or another. Um, the UN, I don't know how like the UN is. I mean, the UN will probably survive this, but it's pretty rough. This isn't like the '90s anymore with the unipolar moment where the U.S. can just vote against the rest of the world continually and expect there to be no sort of pushback from anybody. Like I think in one of the more recent votes, France actually voted for a ceasefire. So it's rough though. It's rough. So yeah, I don't know what Baby's gonna do at this point in time. Also, the like somebody John Mersheimer pointed out when he was being interviewed. There's no guarantee that whoever succeeds Netanyahu isn't going to be more radical than him. Like, is going to be an even like is going to be like even more like over the top hardliner. Because the ultra orthodox like far right parties are continuing to gain power as time goes on, and as the demographic situation continually shifts in their favor, it's just kind of a matter of time at this point. Um, as things continue to worsen. So Yeah. So I don't know. It's just I don't see how this situation can end. Like, what is the best case scenario? Like, because it's not going to go back to the status quo before. Israel's not going to accept a two-state solution at this point in time. Uh, Egypt's not going to reabsorb the Gaza Strip. Jordan's not going to reabsorb the West Bank. There's literally no solution to this problem that doesn't involve ethnically cleansing the Palestinians, at least from the West Bank. I don't see any way that this can be resolved. Other than that, or just going back to the status quo, and Gaza goes back to being a prison camp. So, once again, I think people sometimes forget that a lot of what I say is me attempting to analyze things, and is not necessarily how I feel about the situation. Like, I'm trying to say how the world feels about Israel carpet bombing the Gaza Strip, not necessarily how I feel about it. I'm not nearly as sympathetic to Hamas as I seem at sometimes. I just that is to most of the world what it looks like is Netanyahu's unhinged, that he lost it after Hamas launched an attack, and he's like pursuing basically genocidal policies against the Palestinians and blowing up hospitals and making crazy speeches about the end times and stuff like that. Now, is that the case? Maybe or maybe not, but that is what the optics of the situation are. It's like how China started to portray itself as like the great nation of peace, like that they're making peace deals between Saudi Arabia and Iran. They're the reasonable ones. They're the ones who are like anti-imperialism and all this stuff. Is that actually true? Partially true, partially not true. But the fact is that they're actually like their optics are actually pretty good at the moment. I don't like communist China. I've never liked communist China, but they are like not acting completely retarded like the U.S. is acting. Like Biden going to Israel, hugging Bebe, and saying, "Oh well, we're going to. You have a blank check, Bebe. You can do whatever you want. You can carpet bomb the Gaza Strip." Uh, okay, Bob John says I can agree with you on the optics. You're right, Argent. I hear. Yeah, like when I'm talking about the BRICS and stuff like that, part of it is just the optics of the BRICS. Like the BRICS have much better optics than the U.S., and I've been saying this for a long time. That the U.S., and I'm sorry if I keep repeating myself, basically says if you want to do business with us, if you want to have relations with us, you have to suck our dick, you have to prostrate yourself, you have to legalize gay marriage, you have to fully legalize abortion, you have to accept unlimited immigration. You basically have to culturally turn your country into like a neoliberal um, hellscape and just do everything we tell you to do, and then you can be our subordinate and we'll treat you like you're a slave. Is basically kind of how the U.S. is. Whereas China's like, okay, well, we don't really care about your internal political system. We just want to make money, and we want you to make money and us to make money with you. We're just gonna come here. We're gonna build roads. We're gonna build factories. We're gonna buy your resources, and we're not gonna like bother with your internal politics. And for most people, if you're given those two deals, like someone who's at least pretending to treat you like an adult and is willing to listen to your concerns and at least pretend to meet them, versus someone who basically demands unconditional surrender out of the gate, I mean, who are you going to side with? If you're like Uganda or some African country that still has fairly conservative views of like on social issues, China, are you going to go with China, who's like, you guys can do whatever you want? I just want to buy stuff from you in a legitimate business deal, or the US who's like, no, you have to completely abandon your entire culture and religion and everything and just embrace pause. Now, once again, I don't think China are the good guys. I think I'm sure China is scamming all these people. I'm sure they're trapping a lot of people with low agency and high time preference into debt traps that they'll never be able to pay off. But they're at least able to like have decent optics doing it. They at least like I kind of respect it to a certain extent that like Western countries are like, no, we can't do business with like these corrupt third world countries because the people who run them are too retarded to make this. Like they don't have agency, so we can't really trust them to like be able to make business deals. And China's just like, look, we just want the oil. Just yeah. Whoever the like flavor of the dictator of the week is, yeah, we totally support you, man. Yeah, more power to you. Just let us get that oil. Just let us get that oil. And I kind of respect the just complete Machiavellian nature of it. Once again, don't make me. I'm not trying to say that it's morally right what China does. I'm just saying at least they're acting morally wrong in their self interest, and at least they're getting something out of it. Like, once again, this was, I think, my favorite point someone made about the Iraq War. Like, the worst part of the Iraq War is that the US didn't even get the oil. Like, if they had have invaded Iraq, got in the oil, and, like, gas prices went down in the US, but based, like, that would have been like at least there would have been some kind of accomplishment for it. Instead, it was like this G slur. We're gonna build democracy and Iran's gonna pay for it type thing that went absolutely nowhere and just wasted trillions of dollars and decades of time. Like, can you imagine what the U.S. could have done with the money they wasted on Iraq? Like, they could have rebuilt their highway system. Imagine if that had have gone into nuclear power. Imagine if that had of like, how about just give it back to the American people in the form of a tax cut? Just cut taxes, maybe pay down the debt a bit. Like, the money could have been spent. You know what? Just give all the money to. Yeah, they did get oil. They have military bases in Syria. Well, they got the oil from Syria. Um, I don't know how much they actually got from Iraq ultimately. Gas went down under Trump. Okay, so maybe it did. Okay, well, I stand corrected. I mean, it is what it is, I guess. I do like the crocodile tears that like they complain that Hezbollah or whoever is attacking their bases in Syria, they're like occupying they're occupying parts of Syria that the internationally recognized government has asked them to leave. And if they get shot at, they're complaining. It's like going into someone's house and like saying I live here now, and then the person shoots you, and then you yell that they violated the NAP or something. It's some like autistic shit like that. But I don't know. What would be interesting is how Trump would have dealt with this whole thing. Because while Trump was, I think, a much more rational actor on a lot of foreign policy issues, he was probably and remains the most pro-Israeli president in U.S. history. So who knows? He might have been saying, like, telling Bebe to just do it, like, just go for it, seek out the final solution to the Palestinian question. Just do it, Bebe. Ethnically cleanse the West Bank and Gaza Strip. You know you want to. So yeah, so Bebe is basically in like this hell scenario, and I just don't see a way out. Like if somebody in the chat says, "How do you think this can end?" Like not like I'm not even talking about what would the good ending be, what would the best case scenario be, what would a scenario be at this point in time? Like what conclusions are even physically possible? Because I mean they can't do this military operation forever. Um, you have a large portion of the civilian, the Israeli adult male population, who's not in the workforce. The country's losing like hundreds of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars a day. The economy is going to go like is just going to be fucked. It can't go on forever. So I just don't even know how it will end. Endless military occupation in Gaza. I guess, but once again, that's not like is Israel just gonna like is the idea that like they're gonna occupy Gaza and the US is gonna pay for it? Like they're just gonna get the US to give them however much money it takes to indefinitely occupy the Gaza Strip. And that's how they're gonna solve like the massive budget shortfalls. Because keep in mind you have like what is it hundreds of thousands you have like what 2 to 5% of the adult male population or whatever, and more than that of the actual working population who's in the army now, who's not doing productive labor, who's not paying taxes. Well, I guess they're paying taxes on their government salaries, but you get what I mean. People who are not engaged in economically productive behavior. The other interesting question is what